RD Weeks, welcome back into the pod.
Hey, super excited to be able to serve again. I loved it. First time around was epic. Excited for round two as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I mean, you were my season opener in season one with some pretty epic download numbers. So hopefully that repeats again. I'm sure it will because you just bring so much energy to the podcast. So I'm excited to have you back. And I'm especially excited to talk about the topic that we're going to discuss today, part of the social pillar of holistic well-being and talking about community.
Oh, so excited. Yeah.
So
Well, speaking of,
yeah,
well,
go ahead.
I gotta jump into because one, I appreciate you again for inviting me to come on and also to celebrate too when it comes to going out there and doing the thing is like it's season two. And that's so freaking like amazing, incredible. And I want to make sure I celebrate that too and share that
Thank
your
you. No, I'm stoked about it because I honestly like started the podcast in a sense because like writing blogs is a lot of work. And I tend to be the type of person when I write that I go back and I over edit. Like I get so nerdy with it before I'll publish it. Whereas like with podcasting, it's like almost a talking blog. Plus you get to talk to other humans. It's not just that one solo thing that you're doing. I had no idea how much I was going to love this. Like I get so just like naturally high off of doing podcast episodes. It's so much fun. So, thinking back to like your first episode, I'm like, this is the kind of fun that I want to have that never stops. Like, let's not make this obsolete. This is something I can continue doing. I can see myself at like 80 years old, still doing podcast episodes and talking to people and just jamming out. So thanks for coming back. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the support.
absolutely.
So community, this is a big buzzword, I think, over the last few years, especially since COVID. I feel like there has been this really big movement towards community. And I know that you even made a shift. Public speaking was kind of like your jam when we did your first episode, and now you're kind of shifting into the community realm, which I'm super excited about. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, what do you think this big push towards community is all about?
Well, what comes up too, like I appreciate that for insight. Like I think it again goes back to loneliness. I feel there's a big crisis happening right now around loneliness of us feeling lonely. And when it comes to this community, this word, I mean, we get drawn to wanting to belong and be a part of a group. And of course, social creatures, we want to be around others and feel that connection and that belonging. And so when it comes to loneliness, there is, of course, this word of safety, of being able to go out there and feel like you can show up in your genuine self and be able to express that in community. And so I feel for the movement now of more and more communities popping up, there's also a desire for those that are creating those communities, similar to me wanting to create a community. It's like, I want, there is a moment of fear sometimes of going out to other communities and testing it out. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, I want to create a space of safety where people can relate to my own story of what I'm going through and create a space where people can come together and feel that support and just have some amazing fun too together and also go through the challenges and the struggles and share those too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you touch on so many things, and I definitely want to hit on a lot of those concepts and ideas that you came up with. But talking about this loneliness crisis, just recently, the Surgeon General actually came out and said that we have a loneliness crisis in the U.S. And it was like, it's higher than the depression rate at this point, the number of people that are feeling lonely, and I think some of that was for sure COVID and having to go into quarantine and separate ourselves from each other. I think there's a lot of other root causes too around this loneliness, and you touch on a very, I think, salient point in this is the safety part of it, of feeling like we can show up in a genuine way as our authentic selves and be accepted and belong to a group. And I know, like we touched on this, like authenticity was a really big part of your speaking previously. And I'm wondering if being in community or or approaching a community business has changed maybe your definition of authenticity, or has that stayed the same?
So for me, it stayed the same. It really, I think of like, I'm going into the word genuine is the one I really relate to with it, of like what what is being said, or what's said is being ultimately. I don't know the exact. I'm paraphrasing it, but basically, what you're saying, you're being that.
Mhm.
And I feel sometimes, I know in my own journey, so like I've been in business now for almost 10 years. And like you talked about it, I was doing public speaking for a while. I think about it as a majority of the time was spaghetti phase, or just figuring out what works, throwing different ideas, if it's meditation instructor to social media consultant to event organizer. And what I was starting to realize in my own journey was that I felt like I had to say things that I thought other people wanted me to say. If that's my wants and desires, thinking, okay, what do they want from me? Like what are they wanting me to say in this moment for my wants and desires? And then doing that because I felt in that moment that I was making them feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what I realized in the journey now over the years was that really it was my own fear of showing up and expressing who I am that was holding me back, to instead of sharing what I thought they wanted me to say, what I actually wanted to say. And for many of those years in my life, I would say a majority of the time in my life, I was being inauthentic. I was not being genuine. And it's only been now for a few years now of really diving into this work of understanding who I am, which I believe it all starts with understanding who you are, to be able to get comfortable with this person, and then courageously step out there and create opportunities where I can show up in a genuine way of the words I'm saying, I'm actually really being that. And that could be like, hey, I want to actually go outside right now and go and do an activity rather than have this conversation right now. I need to take a break. So that could be, especially in relationship,
Yeah.
a great example that someone could lean on as to what the hell are you actually saying in this moment. So that really has been a big realization, but it goes back to what the question is, like that definition for me has not changed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you pulled the genuine into it. And really all of this kind of like, in a sense, tracks back to vulnerability and our ability to be vulnerable. Um, and I think that sometimes the idea of what vulnerability is kind of gets a little bit elusive, especially on like social media, where we're like, I'm feeling like I'm being vulnerable by sharing, what's going on in my life. And it's like, but there comes a point where you realize you have to be able to trust the people that you're being vulnerable with. And that is a process that is done over time. But I think community is like the best like place for that to be born, to build that trust. So speak to your experience with that.
Yeah, well, so thinking back to my own experiences of community, I've been a part of different communities, and there have been moments where it's been really positive, of feeling like there's a deep, genuine willingness to understand who I am as a person. And then there are other communities where I notice it's either surface or transactional. They're looking for a transaction. I think about it in business sense of
Yeah.
joining different groups out there. You start to realize, like, I feel what's really important for anyone that's looking into going into community and navigating the different communities out there, asking yourself in this moment, when I'm joining this, are they actually asking questions about me, the person, the human being, and getting to know me? Like if it's asking a simple question of, what is it that you desire in your life right now at this moment? Or currently, what are some hobbies that you're really enjoying that actually fuel you and energize you? And like these different unique questions that are outside, and I'm always coming in from the lens of business, but outside the realm of what is going on in your business, what are your challenges right now in your business, what's working in your business, actually taking a step back from the business owner or the business person, or if it's in career, the like whatever career someone's in, outside of that, and actually genuinely understanding, do they feel, or do they know me as the human being, RD
Yeah.
Robert David.
Yeah. But just, I mean, if it's very important. And I think we do identify so many times with like our profession or our business, and it is kind of almost this like separate identity from who we really are. And I'm interested to know, because I know this is something from last season, talking to a lot of coaches that had started their solopreneurirships, that it was like the things that come up in the business realm are the things that you have to deal with on an interpersonal level. Like your stuff is always going to come to the surface. So when you think about starting a community that is centered around the business side of people, a lot of times it is the personal part of them, the non-business side of them that is coming up to the surface, the issues, the struggles, the patterns that are coming up. And to be able to create a space that says, we're here as business professionals, but we're also here for the human side, because it plays such a big part in who you are as a business person.
Yeah, well, and I go back to this quote that I've shared. I really hold on to it too, and it may have heard it somewhere else. I cannot remember the source of it, but it's like human beings do business with other human beings, and so it's not a business to business, but it's human beings to human beings.
Yeah.
In this moment right now that we're in, and so to really take a step back and realize that it is focused on relationships and being able to realize relationships take time to develop. That I believe that there's no way to fast track that. You can get into immersive experiences and you can create some really strong bonds very fast that you feel can be lifelong friends. However, there's a second part of that, of actually, are you going to put the effort and the energy to continue to cultivate that relationship?
Yeah.
And so it's the same with community. Like if it's just coming in on an online community to an in-person community, that's like your local networking group. And depending on the consistency of it, like thinking back to, am I actually showing up and putting in the effort on my end as someone that's wanting to be a part of this community? And is the organizer or the community host actually showing up consistently and taking the time to get to know me, one of their members? Or I like to think about it with my own, is like connector, like someone that's actually in there and experiencing this. And so that's also something else to think about and feel into as someone's going on that journey of finding community.
Yeah. When I think about that, I think about like reciprocity is what comes into mind, is that it's like, I'm putting into this as much as I'm getting back from the other members of the community. And I think, it was actually listening to Tim Ferriss talk about his podcasting journey. I mean, obviously a very successful podcaster. And he was asked the question about, when you start to dig into some of the personal aspects of your guests and asking these questions, like, how do you get them to be able to feel open and like they can share these personal parts? And he's like, you have to lead with vulnerability. You have to be vulnerable yourself and show people that it's safe to do that. And then that basically shows them like, I've got you if you've got me, and let's, dive deeper. And sometimes it does it. I think it takes time, but I think that is one piece that maybe has been missing in some of the communities that I belong to, is that the people who were running the community or started the community did not role model or show that vulnerability piece right off the bat.
What can happen too when we're jumping into community and then we look at someone that's organizing it and trying to understand who they are, it's realizing that we are all human beings, and so we are not perfect. The key is to kick that word out of your vocabulary. Like, I don't believe in that. I don't believe that any one of us is perfect, and on every level we are struggling in some way. So we all go through the struggle. And I know in my own journey, it's like I'm navigating the overwhelm. Like we talked before jumping on, it's like I'm navigating my own overwhelm of my career and work. And, sometimes there are moments where I just want to completely shut off and take a break. And it's important, of course, to take those breaks. But it's realizing that, is the person willing to share their struggles? And that's not, and of course it leads with the community host, leader, organizer, whatever other word you want to put in there, it leads with that. But then also notice if there's a ripple effect within the other community members, because what can sometimes happen is everyone puts on then the mask of saying, no, everything is fine, everything is okay.
Yeah.
It's great. And that can be positivity, the positive aspect. And sometimes I think about it, it can get really toxic in a positive way, because that's just not real life. We all are going to go through the struggles at some point, even if we're not willing to accept that for ourselves. I think that gets into a whole nother angle of a conversation we can go down to for healthy and unhealthiness within our feelings. but it does start with, is this community, are people willing to share really what is going on, both the positives and the wins and the fun aspect, which is key, really important. That's what draws us in. And also with that, hey, the struggles that are happening, the challenges, and being super, just again, goes back to genuine, authentic in their delivery of like, this is what's going on, and realizing that it is natural and being able to vocalize that it's natural, because then there's an ease with that rather than like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with this person, or if there's something wrong with me. It's just knowing it is natural process to have the struggles and the challenges in life.
Yeah. And I think that's super important to actually like talk about that in community, because I do think like, especially with solopreneurship, a lot of business owners get into that sense of almost imposter syndrome, where it's like, I don't want to admit that I'm having a hard time getting my business up and going, or the things that I'm struggling with. And it can almost lead to like this Pollyanna-ish like mentality of like, everything's fine, everything's okay. This is the most awesome experience. But like what's going on internally is like, they're like, this sucks and I'm overwhelmed. And am I ever going to make it? And you feel so alone in that experience until you vocalize it. And then you hear from other people, they're like, yeah, this is hard. And I'm struggling with the same things, maybe in a different area of my business, but I'm in that same boat with you. How can we help each other to get into a better situation and support each other through that?
Well, and what's so important is, when, again, going back to like someone looking for community, it's being able to discover peers too along the way. Like I really believe in the peer-to-peer education system and the format, meaning that there's not a one person is better than the other on a leadership standpoint to even a teacher role. It's like, hey, I'm showing up as a teammate for you. I may have absolutely more experience in a certain area or expert or focus, especially if it's in business. However, I'm still a peer. I'm still a human being here. And you have some other amazing aspects that you have way more knowledge than I do. And what we can get caught up in is, one, the person that's organizing, trying to get people together, is like, I have to act in an authority role and show that I have it together. So then, of course, with confidence, people are like, I want that confidence. And so that to draw them in. However, I really feel there's that hiccup of not providing the full 360 view of you, the person, when you're coming in and creating community, of showing, hey, like, yes, I may have it together on this, but I also don't have it together on this. And I really think in this day and age right now, that's actually such a superpower and such a strength for community organizers to really lean into, because there's a lot of the BS out there. And we, as someone that is looking for community, is really good now at recognizing when there's BS in a community, of like, they're not being super authentic or genuine. And so I really believe in that, of the importance of looking at it from peer-to-peer focus too.
Yeah. I think you nailed it on the head when you said, like, if you're not doing it that way, you're lacking the authenticity, you're lacking the genuineness of your situation and maybe why you created that community in the first place. And I think it's super important too, that not just the community host, but the other members of the community, that we're meeting each other where they are, because we all are going to be in different places in our journey, whether that be the journey of business or the journey of life. And I think that when we're able to do that and say, like, okay, I might be ahead of you as far as like where I am in my business, but at the same time, I'm able to meet you where you are and help you to get to that next lever of expanding yourself and expanding your business.
And also to another insight that came through for knowing whether or not community is for you is being able to see in that moment, throughout the process of, especially if it's the coming into the community to start and the first few weeks, months, is there a customizable aspect of this for my needs and my current desires and wants? Or is there a rigid, this is the only way? Because how I believe in it, how it was shared with me, that I really resonate with, and again, this is from John Butcher, someone I admire in this space, is that there is no one right way. There's only a right way for you. And it's so important to take the time to consider, is this community saying this is the only way? Or is this community saying, what is it for your situation right now? And how can we support you in your current situation with different ways to go, different customizable ways to go about that?
What would that look like in a community? So I'm thinking, of course, online communities, when you bring people together, I think there has to be a little bit of a structure to how things work, but like expand a little bit more on like what it might look like customizable for an individual.
Yeah. So, well, I think of, universal truths. I believe in that. Absolutely. And I'll take it from a business lens. Like there are going to be universal truths that come into this. One that I believe is like, you have to put in work to make the business happen, especially to start. And there has to be a consistency of that, of putting the reps. Now, what comes into play though, is I also believe in the importance of putting in the reps for your breaks. And so when it comes to each person that is a business owner coming in and wanting to be a part of this community, it's like, okay, we have to put in the work, we have to put in the time and the energy. And also too, we got to figure out for you what feels in alignment for when breaks have to happen, where you're headed to burnout. What are the signs that you feel you are starting to struggle and actually starting to resent your business? What are those for yourself, so that we can make sure that we are seeing those signs before it gets too late, where all of a sudden, instead of just needing a day to have a break, for me personally, for my own personal schedule, I need to have at least one day a week off business.
Yeah.
That's important, at least one. And those that know, getting started in the entrepreneurship journey, business owner, you feel like you're working every single day.
Yeah.
And that I just believe on some level you need a break. And so that's what works for me, of knowing that's my threshold. But it's going to be different for everyone else too. It may be 2 days that you need, or ultimately 3, and just, it needs to be 4 to get started. And you really need to put in the work and the effort for those 4. And then you have the 3. And of course, every situation is different. Someone may have another job, raising kids. Like, you got to look at all of those aspects of the holistic approach of, outside of the business, what is this person going through right now?
Yeah.
That is also going to affect their performance and their willingness to continue to put in the reps for their business.
Yeah, I think just from my experience of starting a couple of online communities, just the learnings that kind of came up from that, where the engagement is going to wax and wane. In summertime, everybody's traveling, everybody's out doing stuff. So your engagement within the community is going to decrease drastically. In the wintertime, around the holidays, that's going to drop down again. So there's these periods of like high engagement and these periods of low engagement. And if you are pushing for engagement's sake, you're going to be burning out the people in your community, because it's like they're trying to like live their life and be a part of this community. And I think with online communities in particular, that is a hard line sometimes that you have to draw and say, like, we're just going to have open engagement and accept that there's going to be these almost waves that come and go with different seasons. And that may be the season of their life at the time. Maybe they're going through something difficult, or they've got just more family obligations. I think about people that have kids going back to school. That always seems to like wreck people's schedules whenever the kids go back to school, even though it happens every year. They like know what to expect. It still is just this like big shift for them in their schedules and like their routines to get back into that. So I think that's actually very wise insight that you made. So speaking of like how we're building successful communities and how we're fostering engagement, and I'm going to put a pin in this because I want to talk about, you just took your first vacation in a very long time, and I want to hear what you learned about that experience. But as we talk more about community, what are the tenets or the components, or I guess the universal truths of creating a community that have to be there in order for the community to be successful and thrive?
Yeah, well, so it's one word for me to that really hits it, is caring. Is there caring in the community, and not surface level caring, but really deep to the heart care? And that starts with the person that is wanting to step up and create this community. Like, is this bigger than them? Like, does it feel like a calling? Like there is a hidden reservoir of energy within them that gets sparked when they're thinking about it, diving into it, and they're like, I am ready to go. Doesn't mean they're not going to have the off days. Does not mean they're not going to have the days where they may not want to show up. That happens, but that there has to be a deep, really deep, heartfelt care for this community. And that's where I believe it starts. And then of course there's some other other aspects to that too, that can support a community, but really at the heart of it. And if you were to ask, like, what's the biggest lever point, is really a sense of deep caring for this community.
I completely agree. I mean, it goes back to kind of almost like the purpose and the mission, the why about why you started this community. It has to be coming from, I think, a place of service and a place of like really wanting to improve the lives of, whatever the community may be centered around, the lives of those people. That ultimately to me is what community is for. It's that support. I do think it's a catalyst for self-actualization because you're able to have those mirrors where you can look at each other and learn from each other's experiences without maybe having to go through that experience yourself. But it ultimately does come down to a deep sense of caring about the well-being of the members of your community, as well as the well-being of yourself.
Yeah, and to lean into that too, even more from let's say it is a business owner that wants to start a community for the specific work that they do. Being able to realize, if I were to build this community without any money coming in, and then there's just people in there right now, and I'm working with them, do I still feel energized? Like, is there a excitement to actually show up? Does it feel, actually, I like to think about it, does it feel like a break from the other aspects of business that you're actually excited to jump in and be a part of? When you get that feeling from a community organizer, then you're onto something. And it goes back to another person I really admire, Joe Polish, where he talks about the ooh feeling, like the ooh, that feels great, or the like that does not feel great. And so if you are getting the ooh feeling in community, then that means you're really onto something, and to dive into that and explore what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we talked a little bit about the importance of psychological safety. This was another insight that I had gained from the second community that we started was, we were all of the same breed, right? Same solopreneurs. We were all new to what we were doing. So there was a lot of similarities. And I think we made the assumption starting off that it was like, well, because we're all in the same boat and we kind of like relatively know each other, that the psychological safety was going to be there. And we found out that it was not. It was something that had to be developed. It's something that does take time. And it's something that I think you and I talked when we did the prep call for this, that it's almost like when you're vulnerable, it can put you into like a state of anxiety, of like a fight, flight, freeze mode, because you really are putting yourself out there, sharing things that you're like, am I still going to belong? Am I still going to be accepted? Are they going to think I'm stupid because I'm, struggling with this particular thing? And it's like, we have to go into that window of tolerance and come back down to baseline. And then it's like titrating how much we can tolerate every time we go into it. And that's not an overnight process.
I mean, that could be years. Like that could be years, decades in that process, especially from a community standpoint of building one out, which, as I say, decade, if that scares someone, then it may not be something to want to explore for yourself. Like if you're like, decade, I don't know about that. It doesn't mean you can't build it, of course, but it's knowing, hey, I'm not going to be in this for the first, like for the many years down the line. How do I make sure I hand this off to someone else that could really take this over? So that's also something to just remember for yourself, as someone that's, wanting to build a community. But when it comes to safety, what I found very interesting, I'm going to take in the lens of like personal growth space of a human being, and then we can like bring it into the community space as an overall group, is that there are moments, and it's been talked about a lot, the pushing out of your comfort zone, the getting discomfort is where growth happens. I do believe in that there is a need for pushing the discomfort into new experience. Any new experience is going to be uncomfortable. And I mean, that's life. Yeah. And so it's acknowledging that. However, in order for the insights that come through when you go into that level of discomfort, in order for those insights to register and to then integrate within you as the person, there has to be a level within your own self and your body. I think about that with somatic work that I've experienced of feeling into the body. There has to be a level of safety that you feel to be able to receive the message that's coming through. Because if you think about or feel into it, if you were in a constant state of discomfort, of anxiety that could come up because of that stress, you are not thinking about the whole insights and lessons that are coming through.
100%.
You're just thinking of trying to get through the next situation that's about to hit
Survival.
you. Yeah, survival. And so I really feel that's important for people to take in, because there is this always push of going constantly outside of your comfort zone, like 24 hours or 24/7. And when we can actually take a pause and notice that there has to be a moment of a break from that to take in all the information we've gathered, that really starts to shift how people interact with discomfort and with growth ultimately, and their own personal journeys. So I definitely want to make sure I share that too with people so they understand that. And then I can tie it in. So like coming into community now, when we bring that into a community setting, of course it goes back to the organizer, the one connecting everyone in there. It starts with them, of understanding, and it goes back to public speaking. Even I'll bring it into public speaking. For leading off, it's better to lead off softly and then expand out, because there's so many different types of learners in the audience. And if this was shared with me by Eric Edmeades, who's a big teacher for me in public speaking, is that there's a wide range of people in that audience and how they learn. And you want that broad spectrum appeal of really getting the entire group to be involved. And a great way to do that is to start softly, to then build up into the crescendo of you really sharing what it is that you're wanting to share. And then it can be a peak and valley throughout the entire talk. And you can also bring that into lens of building community. It's better to start small in the window of tolerance for vulnerability, and then really start to expand out. And if you think about it, it is common sense. I mean, somehow when we get into the digital world, it feels like common sense gets like kicked out the door.
Common sense is not always common practice.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. And so it is common sense in relationship building, of especially on dating. It's like, you don't want to maybe on that first date share all of your deepest, darkest secret. Like, this person's just like, I'm just trying to get to know you right now.
Yeah.
You're sharing a lot. And so on all levels, and I know there are rare exceptions. I know there's gonna be some people that are gonna be like, wait a second, I did that, and now I'm like married for decades.
There's always the one-offs.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, don't
Yes.
share all of your trauma story on the first coffee date.
Yeah. And so again, there are those exceptions, but for the majority of the time, it's better to start small. And so thinking about that in the lens too of community building, start small, get a sense of the members of their level, and get feedback, be able to actually in the moment ask how people are feeling. Does this resonate? Are people feeling comfortable? And if you're getting no head nods, as like a prime example, if you're seeing no head nods, everyone's got video on, you're seeing no head nods going, and you're actually seeing these people going like, nope, like for like shaking their heads back and forth of I'm not comfortable right now, then that's great feedback that you can take on right there and right then to be able to adapt and change up how you're going about this. Is really important.
And I think that takes a certain level of attunement on the community host or leaders part, is to be able to look at, okay, I'm looking at the video, like we're all on Zoom, there's 12 faces staring at me, and all of them look like deer in the headlights. Okay, we need to back it up, and we need to do something a little bit more fun, nonchalant, that's like non-threatening, because everybody's feeling like, and when you were talking about the ability to integrate information or to really absorb and take that information in, there's a new book out by Dr. Porges around the polyvagal theory. And he talks about how a lot of times, even when people are reading books or listening to podcasts and there's triggering information in there that they maybe don't even realize that it's triggering them, but it is putting them into that anxiety state. And then they'll go back and ask questions about the book or about the podcast episode that they listened to, and they don't remember a darn thing. like they listened to the whole thing, but because they were in that state and their nervous system was dysregulated, they don't retain any of the information that they heard. And so that makes total sense too, when you bring somebody into a community and you're trying to integrate the information, you're also trying to integrate, like, these are the flows, like how we work in this community. They're not going to be taking that information, integrating it, or the learning that they might gain from other community members if they're in that space of feeling like anxietied out or stressed out. That makes complete sense. And I know for you in particular, like you're very attuned to people's emotions, people's emotional states. And I know that part of that came from being a public speaker. If you were to give advice to somebody who's like, I really am passionate about starting a community, how would they develop the skill of emotional attunement?
Well, so I got to go back to the beginning for my own journey,
Yeah.
which was I was numb to the feelings that
Yeah.
I felt the only feelings that were coming through were the big feelings, the big moments in my life, both negatively is how I influenced that, or positively. And so I am, to make sure I share that for everyone that is watching and listening, I started from a place of really not understanding the feelings coming through for myself, really feeling chaotic in that. And my advice then for someone to get started is to be able, goes back to, so somatic is a work that was introduced to me for body recognition and understanding the different modalities to go about this. But the best way to do it is to come back into the rest of your body. Out of, like, take it out of the mind. The mind is part of the body. Somehow we don't realize that. Like sometimes we'll say, hey, mind, and then your body. But wait, your mind, like you are, it's part of your body. So that's really important. But taking into the rest of your body, being able to come back into it. And so there are different ways to do that. It's about presence, being in the moment. And so for me, it's actually sitting on my bed, or just if it's standing, sometimes it depends on how I'm doing this, but just being still and then just noticing what's moving in my body. And that could be like, okay, my feet are moving right now. Like I want to shake my feet a little bit. So I'm going to shake those out. I feel a desire to do that. It's in essence being on the park bench and your body is telling you what it wants to have happen. And it's like, those cars going by, you're noticing that, okay, it wants me to move my feet. All right, cool. I'll do that. Move my legs. And so that's how I do it. There are other ways that are, more popular out there. Meditation is one, to the breath work, just focusing in on your breathing. There are different styles of breathing to make that happen. Also, too, one that was introduced to me that I find really fascinating is getting out in nature and actually looking at flowers. That could be one to allow you to get settled. Or it actually could be petting a dog is another one. Being able to hang out, if it's with your nieces, nephews, kids, like that could be, well, depending on what age the kids are at.
Yeah.
But whatever that is, maybe it's with your partner, just spending time with your partner, and having conversation with your partner. But whatever allows you to get back into the sense of centeredness with the rest of your body, that's really an amazing way to create that both self-regulation and then self-recognition of your feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you bring the somatic part into it, because that's a big thing for me too. And I'll be sure to put some resources in the show notes around somatic experiencing, because it is really powerful when you realize a lot of times our body is giving us signals about what's going on in the emotional state long before we make any recognition of the actual emotional state that's going on. And it's a practice, just like meditation's a practice, breath work is a practice, all of these things you have to learn yourself. And then when you learn yourself, you start to recognize it in other people. You're like, oh, look at that person. They're like, they're tapping their foot or they're doing this thing. And that's something that I did when I was nervous or anxious. And it may not always translate across, but it gives you at least an idea to, like, say, there's something somatically going on with this person. And that's what attunes you into, like, let's just check in and see what's going on in that internal world.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, you really said it too at the end there. It's like you have to ask, like being able to ask. Some people will not tell you, they won't be truthful if how they're feeling, truthfully. Like they may say they're fine or okay, but just being able to, I mean, we've gotten away from it a little bit. I mean, but for the most part, almost all of us can recognize when someone is going through a hard time,
Yeah.
a difficult time. It could be short answers, short responses back. This, you just feel it. You can
Yeah.
feel that energy. We're very in tune in that. Actually, we don't give ourselves, I feel like, enough credit in that. Of we do have a level of understanding when someone's not going through it in a really great way,
Yeah.
and so, or going through it in not a great way. And so the key is also asking and saying, are you like, how are you feeling right now? Like, is it comfortable for you? Is it not? And that's harder to do in a group setting, that type of question. That's
Yeah.
definitely more one-on-one. But just being able to ask, hey, does this make sense? Does it resonate? Is a great way for a group question for you to start to realize, are people nodding their heads in affirmation, or are they shaking their heads in negativity of like, this does not resonate right now?
Yeah. And I think too, when if you are starting the process of approaching people to do check in, because you're feeling like there's a disconnect there, like there might be something going on with them. A lot of times it can be like the same thing that you experienced. A lot of people don't have words for their emotions because they've never really developed that. And so they know the big emotions, right? But if they're not feeling something that aligns with that big emotion, it's like, then everything else, it's just okay. And it's helping to bring language to that. And also just realizing that sometimes you have to ask more than once, because it's that process of like creating a safe space and letting somebody know that you are a safe space for them. So it may not happen on the first time, but just I think keep dialing in is probably what I would suggest to people that are new to like attuning to people's emotions.
Well, and also too, like what you just like saying that of like at the end there of just like, hey, like in this moment, and I'm gonna adapt it a little bit, but just in this moment, like letting them know that this is a safe space
Yeah.
to be able to share what's really going on, and being then willing, going back to the vulnerability, willing to share something that they may not have expected you to say, which is, hey, I'm actually having a bad day right now.
Yeah.
Today has not been great. This has happened for me. However, I'm still willing to show up and be here for you. And this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And that, just doing that act is a door of permission for the other person on the other end to be able to say, okay, they've shared now. They've broken that, that moment, that door. So now I can come in and also share too what's going on.
Yeah. And just even talking about these skills that we develop. I mean, this is just to me another example of where community is so powerful, not only just in the personal growth for us, but in our ability to relate to others. It really does. It puts you in this like container where this is just happening. Sometimes it feels like it's a slow process, but it really is this rapid growth compared to just being in the outside world and navigating this outside of a safe container like a community offers. We also talked about like the sense of belonging. And I think a lot of times with communities, when they're centered around like one particular idea, topic, or this type of person, we think that there's an inherent sense of belonging that goes along with that because we're all solopreneurs or we're all this, that we're going to automatically feel that belonging. But I don't necessarily think that's true. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. Like, I think there's a level, again, it goes back to safety. I mean, that's a word that comes up. If I were to really dive into it, we're not gonna vibe with everyone on that has external similarities to us. And so that means like the job's the same thing, the where we're living is the same thing, in the area that we're in, like all those external factors that may draw us initially to a community, as well as, of course, what they're saying of what they could provide and support for us. Um, those are not going to be the things that really lock us in for belonging in the long term. I believe that goes back to the personal values are really, really important. And so understanding what your personal values are is a great starting point of self-awareness of what do you value in life For me, one is self-responsibility. Take that on. I don't want to get into victim mode. I want to honor that I can be in that situation as a human being and feel like that and accept that that's coming through. However, I am going to take responsibility to go out there and make a shift and a change in my life, and I take that on. And so that's one of my values. And so depending on if your values are not in alignment with the other values that people are discussing, there is either a willingness to have a conversation of common ground, of understanding where each other's coming from. And I think conversation is a beautiful way to do that. Sometimes it goes from conversation to just a yelling match, and that I feel like doesn't help anyone in the end. But being able to understand, like, intrinsically, like, what do I believe in? What are my values specifically? And then what is my perspective on life? And then also too, those fun little quirks that we each share of like these commonalities that we may like outside of what we're coming in for. So that could be our hobbies, being able to connect on our levels of hobbies that we really resonate with. That could be another way where all of a sudden we're starting to feel like we belong in this group. Because again, if it's like group for entrepreneurs, like, you have no idea if everyone's going to be able to connect on that unless you share, hey, these are what I believe in as an organizer for my values. This is who I'm wanting to call in. And if you can do it that way, all of a sudden it helps to filter the process of bringing in people that actually could really feel they're belonging with each other on a much faster way. So if you start with values, start with what you like and what you value in the perspective of how you look at the world, that could be a great way to start to create some filters of who's coming in, and then also repel who do not believe in that and don't agree with that.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely in for the importance of conversation with different views. I feel the importance of getting outside of your circle of influence allows for new perspective and new inspiration to form that you may have never expected. And so I also put out there for those either creating a community or those wanting to join community, join multiple communities. Like, you figure out the number that's right for you. Like, that could go really high, really fast for the amount of numbers. But figure out for me, it's 3. 3 is what I suggest. 3 is what works for me. But being able to have 3 different ones, some that you may not actually agree with, but you're willing to step into that and experience that community, I think could be really helpful for shifting how you look at life and new inspiration that could form from that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very great point, because I think the diversity of the people in the community is what brings a big value add to it. The different perspectives, different ways of looking at things, because you don't know what you don't know until you find out that you didn't know it, kind of thing. And I think, like in the communities that I've created, we actually had community values that were like, we put in place to, in a sense, almost shape the culture of what we wanted the community to look like, to foster that sense of belonging. And the values may not have been the same as my personal core values, but it was like, when I think about what I want the community to represent and what are the things that I want all of our members to respect and honor this value when in community, even though it may not be one of your personal values. I think that is a great way to just kind of set the tone for, this is the space that we want to create. And if you're in agreement with all of these values and you can adopt them as a member of the community, then great, come be a part of the culture. Let's support it, and let's grow and expand together. And you're right, like, this is where a lot of community founders, I think, drop the ball, is that they're just trying to get people in, and they're not looking at the people that don't align with the values of the community.
Well, and 2 aspects that come up that I really want to highlight is, as you said, like, having the community come in and decide the values together. Like, that could be a great avenue to go into. What also has to come up as a caution with that is, as you, the organizer, the one that's actually going to have to put in the most effort, the most energy and time, are you feeling the woo feeling, going back to that, are you feeling that for all of those? Because you may be outvoted. There may be a value in there that actually is going to start to create the friction of resentment that over time is really going to start to grow and grow within you, where all of a sudden you burn out and the community falters and ends. And so it's really an important fine line to work through. And there's different ways to go about that, of talking that out, being willing you could be courageous and step in and say, this is not a value I believe in for this, this, and this. But that would be one that comes up. And then also to the other aspect is when it comes to like just bringing people in, you got to know for you as the organizer, when you feel you're going to have the most energy to put towards this thing. Because if you are starting from a place of immediacy of like having to have people come in right away and you have no runway for yourself of actually building this, you're going to cut corners and you're going to do shortcuts that ultimately in the end will cause your community to falter and fail. Because again, it goes back to relationships. You cannot rush the relationship. You can definitely speed it up in certain ways to start. But if you don't have the systems in place and the processes in place to help support that long term, it's gonna hurt itself. It's gonna implode upon itself. I think it's a prime example that I'll share with that for community is if you start community by doing an in-person event and you're someone that wants to do an in-person event, and then that's going to kick off a community, that is a very high charged emotional experience for a participant coming into an in-person experience. Like that really is going to supercharge them of wanting to, like, especially if they feel that connection, feel that bond, feel like they are a part of something. They're wanting to know how more to get involved in this thing, how more to support it, to get excited for the next thing coming up. And so if that happens and you have nothing planned after, then it's going to be a massive dip in motivation from the person. And now they're going to start to look at it in a negative way for the community, where then it becomes even harder if you a few months go by and you're like, oh, actually, I got this now. It's going to be harder to get them back on into supporting what it is they're creating, because you've all of a sudden shown them that you cannot be consistent in the community support aspect.
Yes. And a couple thoughts on that too is like, even when you get into the community, like you bring people in and they're like, yes, I agree with the values and I'm on board. And then you start to see actions or behaviors that aren't in alignment with the values. It's having that conversation around, and this could go two different ways. Is this person truly a good fit because they're acting in a way that is out of integrity with the values of the community? But then I think you also have to look at it and say, does this value actually align with the community? If it's more than one person that's breaking this value or breaching that, then it's like, maybe this isn't the right value to have in the community because multiple people aren't in alignment with it. And I think people too, sometimes when they see the words we associate with values, I mean, who doesn't want to be all these things? It's like, yeah, I want to be all those values, but there are certain values that we really hold close to us. And there's other values that we're like, yeah, I can stay in step with that, but it's maybe not the most important thing to me. But that's where you have to like watch, if it's not something super important to me, am I still acting in a way that's in integrity with this value of the community? Can I hold up my end of that bargain?
Yes. And oh gosh, like what came through too was the willingness to be malleable, like to allow it to be flexible for the values, knowing that they're not permanent, both as the organizer and as community members as a whole of the group, realizing that these can shift and change. And if you can create a structure around that, bring in a level of system with that, if it's every year, reviewing and setting new values or holding on to the values that are really close, that everyone really supports, and then being able to shift and change the ones that perhaps there seems to be resistance towards. That's a great way to help you in your own well-being.
I think that's great advice for even us as individuals, is to do a yearly review of like, here's the values that I carried through this year. Are these still the values that are like most important to me? And there may be some shifts a little bit. And it's not to say that you're giving up on that value and replacing it with another. It just may be that there's one that wasn't in the core values that is now, for whatever reason, because of the season of life that you're in, has surfaced more. I think it's always important to do these little like check-ins with ourselves, because if you don't, then you get like super far off the path. And then you're like, where am I? Who am I? What am I doing? Those self check-ins, I think it's important for us as individuals, but yes, in the community as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, so a quote that I'm going to hold, that I'm going to share, I believe I shared it last time too. What is this quote by Lisa Nichols, which is communication is the distance between you and everything you want. And the key is to have open communication lines in the
Yeah.
different areas of your life and being
Yes.
able to make sure that you're communicating with what that looks like. And especially for values, making sure, as you said, like having that time to really sit down or lay down or just like just curl up in a ball and reflect on those is
Mhm.
such a powerful thing. I know for me, like I do a annual review of 12 different categories of life. It was shared with me with this program. Life Book is the one I really focus on. There are different programs out there of looking at a holistic view of a human being and the different categories. But doing that process allows yourself to feel like you have a path moving forward. And it's not always feeling like each day is chaotic
Yeah.
in where am I going towards? What am I trying to grow into as a human being? Because we will all have spaghetti phase. I think about that in business. I think about that in life. There are going to be moments where you can just throw stuff against the wall and determine what sticks, what feels great, the ooh feeling, and then what feels like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
feeling. And so that is natural. And then from there, it's starting to really lean into those ooh feelings, bringing more of that into your life. I feel is really important. And having that space to do that, it's scheduling that in. It's not just
Yep.
saying, maybe I'll get to this or like, we'll figure it out. It's actually taking the time to schedule that in like you would schedule time with family, schedule
Yes.
time with your partner, schedule time with your business, making sure that you also have scheduled time to check in with yourself is so important.
And I love the idea of the annual review. And I guess I would caveat that with, I would also do this, like the annual review idea. If you have a major life event that happens, something that completely shifts in your life, whether that be marriage, divorce, the loss of a loved one, because that changes inherently your who. And I think you do, after those big changes, have to go back and be like, okay, now that this has happened, who am I moving forward? And it may be the same, but I think taking that time to really check in with yourself and say, this, because I think a lot of times with those big life changes comes the loss of identity, a
Mhm.
loss of a piece of who we have always been. And there's this recalibration that has to happen of like, okay, now that that's not a piece of who I am anymore, and it may not always be that, but what does that look like moving forward? And what do I need to shift about myself or how I'm moving in this world now that I am this different person having gone through this experience?
Personal experience to share too is for me in my mid 20s having to move back in with my parents because I
Mm.
was not in a financial position to be able to be on my own, and that was based off of a lot of different factors that was coming through at that point in my life. But what it caused for me was it was such a big shift
Yes.
that all of a sudden I'm having to come back into an environment and figure out who the hell am I. For me, that was a catalyst of really being able to have honest conversations with both my parents, creating a beautiful new relationship with them in an adult
Yeah.
version of that, to then actually being able to understand what my values are as a human
Yeah.
being and then the vision that I'm wanting my life to look like. But what resulted from that, which we don't all have the privilege of this, is space.
Yeah.
I was able to have space to be able to explore that. And what I want to remind people is no matter how chaotic your life is, you be going through the mud right now. However that looks for you, like you could be in it. The key is you still have a few seconds even to create space for yourself. And that is worth it than not creating any space at all.
Yes.
And so start there.
Yes.
Start with like what is just one aspect that I can create space in. If that is understanding what is going to be my value for tomorrow, like what is that going to look like in this moment, what am I going to stand on right now, or really put an anchor into of this is what I'm going to focus in on. That could be specifically a habit. Even what is one habit that I can work on for tomorrow, but starting to create more space in your life with how fast it feels, and especially how much we feel like we have to do, being able to have the moment of space is actually, I believe, going to be such an important, I mean, it already is for my own life, a superpower. I feel it can really be an amazing superpower for a lot of people out there in this world. And I hope those that are watching, that are listening, are going to take that in of like, am I actually creating space in my life to be able to reflect?
Yeah. I think it's, you know, it's from what I noticed, you know, in my experience too. So I just lost my dad back in June, which was a huge change in my life. And I think as humans, it's our natural tendency to like get back to normal, right? We're like, okay, I'm going to get back into the same routine, the same things, because we like, in a sense, I think it's a coping mechanism to get back to the sense of normalcy before you had this like major event that happened. But you're a changed person because of that. And you're not there. It's a new normal and you have to figure out what that new normal is. And I think I ran into this myself where it was like I tried to get back into the same routines. It was like I'm going to get back to the same life that I had prior to this happening, and it wasn't working. And I kept finding myself in like these stuck points and like not motivated. And it's like, why can't I just get back to normal life? And it was that recognition of like, I need to take space and figure out who I am now that this thing has happened. And maybe the routines, the morning routine, all the things that worked for me prior to this happening, they don't work for me anymore. Like I have to figure out what works for this new version of myself, and also giving yourself the space to really, truly grieve. Not just necessarily the loss of a loved one, but grieve again, that loss of a part of yourself, an identity that maybe you carried with you that was related to the event that happened. Space is so important, slowing down, just like, even if you have to schedule an hour of time in your busy schedule, you will not regret taking the time to just sit with yourself and check in and figure out like, okay, what's going on in here? What's changed? And you're right. And I think that's its own spaghetti phase of figuring out, what does the new normal look like? What is my new routine? What are the new things that I want to bring into my life now that I'm this different person?
Definitely. And I know too, like for what you went through, and I remember we connected, you know, through text message and just being able to check in. And I feel like that's something that is so at a core of me wanting to do for others. And I feel is also can be helpful for people to take in is like when someone's going through something big that
Yeah.
happens and not so much the celebration. Like, because celebration, everyone's going to come in and be like, yeah, that's great. Like, you know it. But it's really who's stepping in during those moments where it's tough, it gets uncomfortable and it gets really difficult. But if you can also, if you're in this moment of wanting space, you're trying to figure out space
Yeah.
for yourself. If you can actually go out and reach out to someone and let them know that you're there, that in a connect, and it's really hard to put into words, but by doing that act, you are actually allowing yourself to create space as the sender of that message. Well, that could be a
Yes.
call, that could be showing up, that could be a text message, that could be whatever it looks like. You're actually creating space in that moment for your own reflection. And it may be a few seconds, maybe a few minutes, maybe a full day.
Yeah.
And also you're providing that other person that's receiving that an acknowledgement of space,
Yes.
that at least they know there's a safety of support
Yes.
for them of what they're going through. And that's another way to be able to go out there and space.
And a lot of times when we do things like that, when we take space for ourselves and we share that with somebody else, you're giving that person permission to do the same, because they might need it too. A lot of times I think we don't know what's going on in everybody's life. And you're right. I mean, the community that was created by this podcast of all the guests that came, you know, during season 1, it was astounding to me, very humbling, the support that the reach out that I got from the podcast community. It was incredible. Because it is a time where you're feeling very alone in the experience. And not that you want to connect and share with everybody all the details, you're like not in that space yet. But it's still, that's another, I think, to me, a bonus of creating community is that when you have members who are going through really, really hard times, just the love that you send that way I mean, it's like a soothing balm to somebody that's going through something really difficult. So thank you for reaching out after that happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, you just shared it with the power of community. Like when like that's such a beautiful gift of community, is the support system that can come from that. Because I know in most of my life, I feel like I had to be the lone wolf out there. And when we can actually start to figure out who is in our wolf pack, like
Yep.
who is in our pack together, when we have that, it elevates who we are, our baseline as a human being. And I believe we all have epicness within us that is ready to be expressed out into the world. And it allows us to really connect with that when we feel supported in being willing to share that. And so that's another beautiful gift that community
Yes.
brings. And again, a reminder for those wanting to create one, as well as those that want to join. I think those can be both the same thing for a person. It's really important to make sure that that gift is there and being sent out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that might be probably one of the biggest assets that a community can bring, because I think society has almost trained us in a sense. We live in a very individualistic society. It's like you have to do everything by yourself, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're supposed to be, financially independent. Like you think of all of these words that we've heard our whole life, and it's all around like you got to do this by yourself. And I love that the community is like sticking it to that man, saying, no, we don't have to do this by ourselves. We can do life together. We can do business together. We can do all of these things together. We can do hard things together, is the message that I think community really is kind of transmitting to all of us. So I do want to go ahead.
There's one aspect I want to add to that too that's important, is to go into that focus of independence, because we do feel like, okay, we have to go and do this. However, anyone that you'll ask that has aspired in some area that you're really wanting to move towards, it that's financial, to relationship, to social life, to health and fitness, the answer that they will tell you, if they've been at it for a long time and high level in that in their own life, they will tell you they did not do it alone. And actually,
Yes.
the greatest support that they could have is having others support them along that journey. And so this is an important reminder out there, especially for those, I know, because I was one of them, those that feel like they got to do it all and like they got to prove it to everyone that they can do this. Realize that actually the best way to go about it is to make sure that you're doing it with others. That's really what allows for longevity of this thing to actually happen.
Yes. I mean, I'm not going to poo-poo on the idea that you can't get to your goals by yourself, but it's that whole idea of together we can go farther. Yeah. So if you can reach your goal by yourself, but imagine what you could accomplish and what you could achieve and what that goal would look like if you had the support of all of these other individuals helping you on your journey, and vice versa, they're helping you on yours. It's I mean, I think this is why it sits so close to my heart, because I just think it is just this purely human, altruistic idea that we have steered so far away from. And we do need each other for so many different, it takes a village to do this. So how would you, if somebody is maybe not part of a community, they're looking for a community to join, and maybe not necessarily around entrepreneurship or solopreneurship, but just they're hearing this and they're like, yeah, this is something I really want to bring into my life. What would you recommend as far as how to find a community to be a part of?
Well, so gosh, it starts with what you're wanting from community. And so there are a ton, like, I mean, you could get overwhelmed with the amount of different communities that are out there. So it starts with, what are you wanting? I mean, you take the time to write it on a piece of paper, type it on the computer. What do you want from a community? And start with that question and look at what comes up for you in a reflection. And when you can then have a path, because the key is if you just go out there and you can do a spaghetti phase of like just typing in communities, see what, like if you have no idea what you want from a community and you struggle with even thinking about writing it down, just type in like what communities are out there on a search engine, or now with AI, you can do that too with the language learning. If it's ChatGPT as an example, like whatever that is, type it in of like what communities are out there, and then lean into the ooh feeling and the ah feeling that I talked about with Joe Polish. Like be able to start to figure out what are you liking in a certain type of community, because once you have that, like if you have, hey, I want a community that's focused on how to connect with my body and be able to share my emotions. And I can look at it from a man's perspective of like, I want to find men's groups that allow me that space. Yeah. Okay. That narrows
Yeah.
the choices. Like then from that point is when you should really take the time to go out and search for those. Sometimes what we tend to do is we tend to search first and then sift through and
Yeah.
figure out what works. That one, what's going to happen is going to feel very overwhelming. You're going to feel super overwhelmed doing that. Anyone that's ever tried that will tell you that. And then also two is you're going to feel even more confused than ever, perhaps of what you should or should not be doing. You're not realizing what do I actually want. And then also too, with that, it's just going to feel like there is a paralysis of so many different options and choices. And so we can then start first with looking back to inwardly, what is it that I'm wanting from a community? And then making sure you write that down. And then from there, you go out to explore. It just allows you to really focus in on specifically the path that you're wanting to travel on, because it could have like 100 different paths. But then you notice that path that you have already planned, you see it, you're like, that's the path I'm going to. But if you don't have that for directions, you're going to get lost.
Yes. It's like that idea of like, if you don't know what the destination is, any road will get you there kind of thing. And that can get very, very overwhelming. And I think even on a micro level, if you want more community in your life and you're not sure that you're ready for like an online community, start small. If you listen to this podcast or a different podcast, that in a sense creates its own community. If you engage in that podcast or with the people, with the host of that podcast, join their newsletter. If you find somebody that their message really resonates with you, figure out ways to connect with them, because I guarantee you it may not be this like subscriber online community that you come into, but they are in a sense creating a community of people around the work that they're doing. That can be a really small way to start into it. And then that can also lead to these more in-depth online communities. And I think too, a really important aspect of this, because our lives have gotten so online, is seek them out in your community, your like in-person community as well. Meetup groups are a great way to start, trying to find your tribe. And maybe who knows that you're the person that starts, a community in your community, just because you realize that there was a need for that. And I think there's a need online and in person for just more community overall. So, yeah.
And to add on to that, for the virtual online to in person, it creates the in-person experience. It's really hard to compare the two standpoint of in-person and online. The depth that you can go in person from multiple senses that a human being possesses allows for the experience to be much more heightened for community support and the community involvement too. And so I think about that for anyone that's starting a virtual online community. If I would say it's a big ifs going into like when you can have the space to create in person, I believe that drastically increases the strength of your community for in-person experiences. I know that's something I focus in on with my own community, is the importance of planning that out for the future. Like that is coming. It may not be how it starts, and the key is you want to start small, but making sure that you can in some way, shape, or form add that will only strengthen it. And it's not for everyone, of course, but I do believe in the power of in-person is drastically more powerful than online.
Yes. And you just offered me the perfect segue when you talked about your community. So tell me more about Genuine Network.
Yeah. So for Genuine Network, I love to think about it as helping micro business owners, which micro business owners, they're defined at, solopreneurs. It's business owners that have less than 10 team members and less than 2 million in revenue. And it's helping these business owners to stop resenting and start loving their business. And I believe when it comes to loving your business, where that starts is also being able to build an epic business. And for me, that is shared. I love the word epic. It's a lot of fun to say, but also too, when it comes to that acronym, it's the easy, profitable, inspiring, and clear business. And it's to know that that is not always going to be 100% the case for your business, but the goal is to work towards a majority of your time being spent in that type of business. And it's being able, when it comes to that word genuine, having a space where business owners can really come together and share and take the mask off and really share what is going on. Because I believe that you can both share the weaknesses of the struggles right now, and in that same breath, be able to serve someone in your skill sets and your knowledge. Just because you're sharing the struggles and the challenges does not mean that you are not capable of being able to serve. And sometimes we as a business owner fear that we always have to show that we are in it, we're capable, we have it all together. Because if we show the other aspects of that, then no one is going to believe that we are capable of serving them. And I always want to tell people is I want you as a business owner to be able to trust that being genuine to start, and not after the fact, not years of faking it. And then all of a sudden, which is the narrative that usually goes
Fake
down.
it till you make it.
Yeah. I mean, and in their stories, there's tons of stories where they said, oh yeah, I was lying. I did this. I did it personally. I had moments where I was faking it in the beginning of my career. And so what I want to really help people understand is, and I want to help support this, is creating the space where people can feel safe as a business owner to start by being genuine and trusting from that perspective, their business will provide them with the lifestyle they desire. And it starts with people deciding to create space for that. And when it comes to this network, it's utilizing one-on-one support. So coming in from how do you create that epic business? It's through the power of communication. That's where my public speaking background really comes in, and being able to create a space where the business owners, or I'm calling them the connectors in this connectorship is what I think about it, rather than a membership for the community, is they have the opportunity to actually step up and teach in the group dynamic. And so go in and work on their own public speaking skills, as well as gain that one-on-one support as well from myself. And then as the team builds out, other individuals that can help them in their communication in some key areas in their business too. So it's really exciting. It's starting off. And so it's already started, which has been really awesome. So knowing that people like that it's actually a thing and it works is great. And so it's every 6 months is the cycle for the members, connectors going through that process. And then really the goal is to help a business owner be a part of this for 3 years. And then they get to decide from that point on if they want to stay with it, or if they want to decide to, graduate to the next level in their own journey. Because what can happen is someone can come in with a financial goal of wanting to expand out from there, or they want to go stay in it and dive into mastery of communication skills and actually keep it, under that 2 million. But again, that's who this network is supporting, is those people that are the face of their business and that are putting in the work, putting in the reps, and wanting to grow in whatever way that looks like, that allows them to have the epic business.
I love that. And what a great way to build your confidence up in a smaller, more intimate setting versus the stage of social media, the world, where you're like, oh, I'm not ready to talk in front of the world on Instagram. You can build those skills and build that confidence in that private setting that feels a lot more safe, I think. For a lot of new business owners, I think that's fantastic. And you talk about bringing the community into a live event. So I also want you to touch on Gen Con.
Yeah, so with Genuine Con, GCon for short, it's coming up in 2025. That's actually how the Genuine Network got inspired. Was I'm an event background. I had a previous event that I did where it really caused me to burn out. And so for me, I'm wanting to come back into it in a positive way for getting back into a larger scale event. And so the idea of genuine in your business, being able to be genuine and show up with kindness and of service and a giver mindset when it comes to business owners, I really want to be a lighthouse for those business owners to come towards and to realize this is a place for them, and where they can come together, collaborate, support each other in that process, that want to work on their communication skills in the different areas of the business. Because again, go back to that quote by Lisa Nichols, communication is the distance between you and everything you want. And so knowing that if that is communicating with your systems of how you're creating your systems and processes so that they're supporting you and spending less time in your business and more time experiencing life, to actually communicating with new team members or teammates, I like to call them, that are coming into your business, if that's in contractor role or as employees, being able to understand there's a communication process with that, as well as then the sales and marketing component too. And even your vision, being able to communicate what it is your vision is out into the world, and then also getting your friends and family on board too, like your inner circle,
Yep.
being able to have that support. It all comes back to communication and the power of it. So being able to be that lighthouse is something I'm really excited about. It's coming up for the in-person of 2025. And then for those that join in on the network, they get a free ticket to that annual event. It's a part of the connectorship too, which is really exciting. And again, it's being able to have that annual time to come together, but then what is the long-term support? And that goes back to the network, being able to support someone in that journey of the business journey, and not just having them come to this event and all of a sudden motivation can dip from there. Is really allowing for the baseline of a business owner as a human being first, and then as the business second, to be elevated. And so it's not all about business, but it's also about other categories of life too, and how that supports one aspect of your life, which is your business. You are much more than just your business. And it's really important to acknowledge that and realize that, and being able to honor all those other categories, whatever that looks like, if that's the health and fitness to the social life, to being able to also understand your finances, your personal finances, and how it all relates. That's what I'm really excited to bring that to what has been brought into the network and what's continuing to grow in the network.
I think it is so important, and I appreciate bringing the holistic aspect into this, because I think a lot of times we focus on these one silos of our lives when we are these multifaceted human beings, and like all of the spheres of our lives are at play at any point in time. And sometimes, even though you want to focus on maybe the business sphere of life, other things do happen. And to be able to have that support system, that it's like we're about the person first, all of the person, and then supporting that is what allows you to be effective in your business and continue to go out and serve others and do the work. I think that's great. So I'm super excited for you to share all about this, and hopefully we can get a link to Genuine Network if anybody's interested in signing up for the next cohort. So before we wrap things up, I do want to go back to, you just had a vacation and took your first time away from work in like forever. What did you learn from that?
Yeah. So to provide context for people, so I've been almost 10 years now as an entrepreneur. I always say multi-curious entrepreneur and business owner. And I've had one business close, one business open up. And throughout the entire process, there had been moments where I'd taken time off physically from work, but there hadn't ever really been a time where I've taken it off mentally. Like it's been more like I'll think about it as I'm technically off, off of work. And so this was the first time for a vacation. We went to Disney World, which is like the most magical place. Like I was excited. So I'm a nerd too at heart. So I love Star Wars, big Star Wars fan, and also Harry Potter too. So we went to Disney World as well as Universal, my partner and I. And what happened though was like I went with the intention of deciding I will not be doing physically any work. I will not be checking. I'm putting the away messages on. That was really the first time of doing that on all aspects. And then also I will not think about work as best I can. And so what happened for the experience, it was about 5 days. The first day, the business ideas were anyone business owner here, business ideas are popping left and right. And it's like popcorn. And so what I had to do was that first day, take those ideas and put them into my notes app on my phone and let them be. Like take them out of my mind and put them there. I recommend that for anyone that struggles with vacation, do that as a helpful first day, because those ideas are going to start popping. And then what happened was I was really able to start to flow into being present and really allow myself to, it was a full body experience. It was really relaxing, like feeling like the weight was coming off the shoulders and I could be in the moment. I could be in the moment with my partner. She and I were spending really great quality time together. We could be in the moment of experiencing the area that we're at. And what happened after the second to third day, in between that point is when I felt really a true disconnect in the most beautiful way that could be from the business. I realized business is actually just one part of me. I actually now started to realize why I was in business in the first place was to be able to have more of this type of time with the people I care about. and being able, like, I love the work that I do and it's really impactful, but also realizing I'm not my business.
Yeah.
I'm in a relationship with my business as well, but I am not my business. And that was really a big aha moment that allowed me to, one, disconnect from it, then to look at all the other aspects that I can appreciate, and the gratitude, and the big waves of gratitude and appreciation for the work that you've put in and the energy and effort. And then at the end, when it's the fifth day was coming around, I'm then having to gear back into work. I'm like, things have to change. Like, they have to change. It was a moment in my mind of realizing just how valuable,
Mhm.
and it's talked about, and we can get it intellectually, but once you get into your core being of how valuable the time is for you in your life, you start to look at different challenges that you've looked at previously in a unique and new perspective for yourself.
Yes.
And so one that I can share is for the long, like, so as I said, I had one business closed down. At that time I had employees. That was a few years ago. Since then, I have never had anyone else come in. I've had maybe contractors here and there, but I've never had some consistent support. I've done
Yeah.
the solopreneur. Like, I get it. I know it. For those that are in it, I 100% know it. And so in that moment, I said to myself, wait a second, like, this has to change for my own stuff. Like, there is a lot of things I don't like to do in the business, one of which is accounting. Another one is, like, I'm starting to offload, is onboarding for the network. Like, I love building community. I
Yeah.
love being able to be in it, but I don't like the repetitive tasks.
Yeah.
And I don't like the sending out the emails and creating the emails. I just I don't like that. I like to be conversations, like,
Yeah.
in those, and being able to connect. And so that's a decision that came up, was like, I need to figure out how to get support. And so where it started was creating what are called the standard operating procedures, SOPs.
Yep.
If someone doesn't know those, they can look it up. I like to think of them as a sorcerer of productivity, is how I look at them. I think they're super fun in that way.
So
But I
creative.
had taken the time to build those. And I recommend that to any business owner. Start now, even if you don't think you're going to have anyone come in and support you, from an employee to a contractor role for years. Build them now and then continue to revise upon them. But you'll have, like, as an example, you'll have an SOP for how you do accounting. If that's daily, weekly, there's a process. You go through your transactions, you check them off, reconcile your accounts, you go through that process. So I was able to have these for the different areas of my business. And then I'm like, I'm now in to bring someone on. And what tends to come up for someone, I know it came up for me, was like, do I have to have like a 6-month runway or a year runway
Yeah.
of financial resources to be able to support someone coming in? And the answer is maybe, depends on your situation.
Mhm.
However, what I realized for me is, like, I don't need that. All I really need is to know that they can come in. I can have, let's say, a month of the finances ready for them, but then the energy and the time that they,
Yes.
as a task person that's coming, as a contractor coming in for tasks, that they're going to open up for me to then be able to take that energy and continue to dive into my strengths. That increase in revenue is going to support that contractor coming in now for the foreseeable future. And I know that based off, if it's a confidence, especially if you don't have an idea yet, but you just feel that energy shift is going to happen, and you're already seeing the runway happen, then all of a sudden it makes it a lot easier to do that decision, to make that decision happen. And then you're going to notice the growth that could happen, that you realize, oh, I didn't think I could do that in 3 years. All of a sudden I'm on track to do it in 2 years of the goals I had set out to accomplish with my business. And just that shift for me, I had kind of know it intellectually, but to have it in the full body, it shifted everything for just how important that is. And also when it comes to supporting other business owners, that's a big focus now, is systems and processes.
Yep.
Having those from the beginning, knowing they're not going to be perfect and knowing they're going to change. But the key is to not feel like you have to have all or nothing, where scrap it all and restart. It's no, just build upon what you've already created, even if you know that this is terrible. Even if you're like, this is absolutely terrible, at least you got something. Now let's work on it, shift it, and adapt it.
Yes. It's that refinement process that's going to be continual when you own a business. It's always going to be refined. And you hear entrepreneurs that have been successful say these things, like, you need to staff up, you need to offload the jobs that you don't like doing, because I think people think when you say it brings me more energy, like because I'm not spending the time and wasting physical energy or psychic energy on doing that task. But if you don't enjoy doing something, it literally eats away like your soul energy. And if you can take that and keep compounding it in a positive way, because you're not doing the things that you don't enjoy doing that give you that energy, now you have so much more to put into your business, into your connections, into the things that really matter, and into the strengths that you have, versus maybe accounting isn't like your number one strength.
Yeah. Well, and two other aspects that come up really to hit home for people that are unsure of this is like, you, at least I know I did this, and it seems like this is a habit. We tend to overestimate what we feel financially is going to require to have someone come in and support. And that could even be someone that you know as a friend that is an accountant, and or you know, a friend that is in marketing. Like, you may think their numbers are a lot higher than they are, and they may be in the case because they have reason to charge that value. However, what I've noticed in my own experiences is that I've overestimated, and the key is you just got to go out there and ask and determine what are the price points out there, to then know what can you feel comfortable starting to allocate. Because and also, to the important aspect with that, the second part of it is, you as a business owner, I believe, have to be educated in all aspects of your business.
Yes.
You absolutely have to know how to do accounting. I do not believe, and this is going to be perhaps controversial for people, it's like, I do not believe it is beneficial or wise for you to offload that to someone else without you first understanding how it's done. And if that means hiring someone to educate you through that process is really important. I know it may sound tedious, but then you're able to feel so much more confident in your business and understanding it all, that your decision making is going to be 10 times better in the past moving forward, because you have all those insights and those knowledge. It goes back to the importance of data, having all that data, and then you being actually able to interpret that data and knowing how to make the right decisions will be super incredible. Because again, it goes back to this quote that I've heard, is the worst possible advice that you could get from someone is bad advice. And so again, realizing that you're going to be the person that can really determine the best advice for your business, because you know all facets of it, is going to be really, really helpful. And also too, to talk about it, because it's not really talked about that much, there are moments where terrible situations come up where people get taken advantage of as a business owner. That's from contractors coming in and being able to look at if it's stealing money from an accounting standpoint, to shifting their marketing messages and actually doing things that are technically not morally correct that you would want to have happened. Like all these different things can come up that if you're not aware of it, it really can hurt your business or ultimately shut it down. And
or
that's
you just
something
never know too, that it's like, you might hire somebody and then for whatever reason they leave, they have a family emergency, and you're stuck in the situation where it's like, now you do have to pick up the slack. You do have to do it until you can find a replacement. And if you don't know what you're doing, that's just added stress on top of an already stressful situation. It's like, I have to know how to do all the things in my business, so that if I do have to step in again in an interim space until I can get somebody else on board, then I'm able to do that seamlessly, without it being like the super stressful. Now I got to learn how to do it on top of taking on another responsibility.
Yes. And again, it's just this decision making, it becomes so much better for your business and yourself and your well-being, of being able to have the confidence to understand. And the confidence starts with actually practicing what it is you're doing, and that starts with courage, absolutely, to lean into that, to be willing to say, hey, I don't know it all, and I'm wanting support and asking for support. And as long as you're getting that education and constant education, like I always want anyone that's coming in, I don't want to completely offload it. I want to say, hey, walk me through this. What's happening? What's going on? So that I can have that information to then do better decisions for the vision or for my specific aspects that I really enjoy doing in the business.
Absolutely. I think that's so wise. And I love that it took, a vacation to come to all these insights about business. But yeah, I mean, time is the one resource, man, that we don't get back. There's this finite amount that we get. And I think when we start to appreciate that and realize like how valuable that is, and really look at how we're spending our time, and that we are these multifaceted, holistic beings that have multiple things in our lives, not just our businesses, it's so important to take that time to be with friends, to be with loved ones, to be with ourselves, and to really cultivate all the areas of our lives so that we can really show up as that full whole person in all of our endeavors. Man, RD, I just love conversations with you. I wish I could do this every day with you, because I feel like just the energy that comes from this is it's so great. So I've been wrapping up this season. Last season was asking 3 fun questions. This season is just 1 question, and everybody's kind of getting the same one. So when I offer up the phrase to thrive in life, what comes up for you?
Gosh, to thrive, it's to be at peace with yourself. Yeah, that's
Love
what comes.
that. I love that, which means creating space for yourself. Do it, people.
Yeah.
RD, thanks so much for coming back, and we'll be sure to put ways to connect with you in the show notes. What are the ways? Like, do you have a website or social media? Where are you at?
Yeah, so Instagram or LinkedIn is going to be the best. On LinkedIn, it's Robert-David Weeks. Instagram is the most responsive I'm at, and that is at RDWeeks50. Definitely can share links too as well for that. But yeah, send me a DM, send me like what resonated with you the most from this conversation. Love to continue the conversation too with y'all.
All right, RD, thanks so much.